brings. And I think that drawing boundaries like this is really important. Like I said, we're also guiding them for the next 40 years of their life, right? Like, so how do we handle these moments of adversity, although said and done, right? And it is sore, but like how can we continue to guide them through processing correctly instead of just automatically, like, I don't know, maybe coming for someone's head. It's like, no, there's 11 of us on the pitch and there's 26 of us right here all together, so let's talk about it, right? Like, so like continuing to, and I think that's just really important for me in my coaching style, are the boundaries when it comes to that stuff, because you're right, like even as a player I wanted to know right away.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach Podcast with Coach Luca. In this episode, I'm very delighted to welcome Coach Aulani Fernandez. It was great to speak to Aulani just after she had got married, and it was a great occasion for her in a great period of time. And it was fantastic to hear about how her personal life is getting on, especially alongside coaching and when life takes over in terms of work, in terms of recruitment, travelling, games, in that sector, and all the pressures that come with work in itself, but pressures of coaching, the demands, the constraints, the continuous travelling, the meetings, the late nights, the coaching, the planning, the preparation, the reflections, the reviews, the performance indicators, the data analytics, etc. And it's just so much that goes on, but it's great that Aulani has got married, and there was a huge congratulations in order to her, and I hope everything is going very well. Aulani is great because she speaks so freely and with such energy, and I felt that right through the camera, and it was great to speak to her, and I really enjoyed my time, and I really hope to have her on again in the future, and I know that it's something that we spoke about, as I do with most of my guests, but it was absolutely great to have Aulani on. And Aulani's partner actually does coach herself, and it can be tough at times when you're both in a similar background, because, you know, if you have all those pressures and all those things, those elements which you're responsible for, then so does your partner, then realistically you're both under a lot of pressure. And then when you're together, that builds up and that can escalate. But they're in a really good place where they know what works for them. They're both really supportive of one another. It's great because then they have that network and understanding in terms of how their work goes and what it demands from them, and they understand the expectations. So it really does help understanding each other's jobs, and really helps complement their relationship in that sense. And when it comes down to recruiting, they know what aspects they're looking for. They know that they can grow and learn off each other. They can share experiences. They can talk about those experiences that they've had, the highs, the lows, how they can grow, the opportunities that they grow together. So it can be a really good place when you have someone in such a similar background to you. But it was great to talk about how their relationship really supports, and I really love that, and how they have each other there, and what they go through together, and that they're sharing such a wonderful experience. And it's just something so magical and unique about that, and it's something that I really, really support them with in terms of that happiness and making sure it's always there, because you know, you might not find happiness in your job at one time, but making sure that relationship is always happy is the key element. But right now they're combining both, and I'm so happy for them. But in this, it was such a touching episode in terms of philosophies and relationships, which is the key outcome within this episode. We talked about recruitment coming together, the foundations, the quality of people, the high soccer intelligence, and Aulani alluded to ceilings and where people are currently at in terms of their thinking, or what they may reach in terms of their expectations, or where they might limit themselves in expectations, or there's only so far that they can go with, and that ceiling is there. And there are so many different outlooks in terms of what she means by ceilings and what you may take away from it, but really listen to that. And what is great here is Aulani says soccer is part of our identity. I truly love that quote, and taking that away when I was speaking to her was really good. And then that interlinks really nicely with the coaching ladder and how she's looking to progress in terms of the assistant coach, the lead coach, the head coach, and what may be in 5 years, 10 years, how that might look for a partner, how that might look together, how it may mean a decision where they have to move collectively because of their jobs and their demands and the sector that they're in. It was great to talk about that player recruitment then in terms of the traits, player development, relationships, in terms of those personal relationships amongst each other, and how Aulani really allocates those roles and the ladder in terms of the personality for the players themselves. So how does she build a group? How does she unify them? How does she support them? How do they recruit and integrate players? How do they transition players who leave the group? We then interlink that with the coaching philosophy that Aulani has developed, and how that may really look over a period of time, but how that really supports players in terms of that recruitment process, but then looks at the group and then looks at how they perform on the field. And it was great because we touched upon a bit of tactical element at the end of it, and it's something that we're not really huge about talking on here because it's not something that we've really touched on yet. So I can't say, oh, we're heavy tactically driven, because it's not something that we've really touched upon in great detail on this podcast, and that's something that I'm hoping to grow and develop in the future. As you know, this podcast is very much about the coaching, the reflections, the learning, the people, what happens, and there is so many different strands and elements that I really want to bring to it. And it was great that we touched upon it on itself, but this philosophy was so key. And culture, how does this look, the way it looks, how do these traits really uphold the standards, the elements, what she expects within her philosophy, how she sets up teams, the personality test, the colour indicators of personalities and how they can support one another, how teams can be adaptable, how they can set up, how can they approach games in terms of mindset, and what is available to them in terms of the players, the attributes, the traits, the quality that's there, how they adapt the teams when they come and play, whether they stick to their own principles, whether they adapt them. But it was really good to have Aulani on there, and there is so much in this episode, and I just really enjoyed talking to her, and as you can hear, there is such a key element in terms of people, philosophy and relationships, and it was such a touching episode whereby we really got into what means a lot to us as coaches, and how we work with players, how we work with people, how we work with individuals, how we support them, both on and off the pitch, how we look at recruitment by bringing new players in, but it's also very important to look at that transition in terms of when they leave, and making sure they're always part of this family, or always part of the team, or knowing that they can contact us at any time and really come together when they need it. But you can find the podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Podcast Addict, Spotify, and I'm sure there's one more, but off the top of my head, there is a number of areas you can find us. It's at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. I'm Anthony _ Luca 96. It's the Reflective Coach Podcast everywhere else. Drop a like, drop a follow, drop a subscribe, leave a comment. It is really appreciated. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I have. Continue to bring that coaching journal with you, and continue to update your notes every week. It is a wonderful episode, and I'm so delighted Aulani came on. Hope you're doing well, Aulani. I hope you enjoy this one yourself. Thank you very much for your time. Don't forget to drop that like, that subscribe, that comment, that follow. It is really appreciated, and I hope the podcast continues to grow. It's a big thank you from me, and enjoy this week's episode.
Yeah. I was just trying to find the Google Meet link.
That's right, it's no problems at all. You okay?
Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's nice to see you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
That's right, and since the last time we spoke, a big congratulations, because obviously the wedding's taken place, and you're now a married woman, so that must have been exciting.
Yeah, it was wonderful. We went to Cancun and had a destination wedding, and it was filled with so much love and happiness. So it was incredible. Like, best day of my life, hands down.
Well, I'm glad to hear, and it's great that you've had that experience, and something that you can live with forever. Because when you have a big day like that, you want it to go perfectly, exactly the way you've had it. So congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
That's right, no problem. So, it's January. How's it typically looking in terms of the coaching world for you right now then?
Well, I just got back, I think it was last week, from my wedding, as we talked about. And then I jumped right into that next weekend into a recruiting event. And so my team has come back. They're all on campus. Super exciting. Of course, I've seen them in passing. We don't start together until this coming week, actually. And so I'm really excited to start continuing the foundation piece of it all, because it started in the fall, of course, with a new staff, but now we get to really dive deep into what we're looking to expand on, our style of play and all that fun stuff. But other than that, yeah, just a lot of recruiting during this quiet time a little bit, and preparing ourselves for a few games in April.
And that's, good position to be in, and it gives you a good starting point in terms of approaching the season, as you say. That style of play, how you get it across, and then having new recruits can bleed new life into a team, which is quite energizing in a way, but it can also be a start again process. So it's quite interesting how that gets approached, because it's always changing. You might do it one way this year, might be different next year, and then the same again. But when you do recruit these players, is there something particular you look for, or typical that you might go, right, I want these characteristics within these players regardless of their technical, or does it change player to player, or is it fitting in the system? How do you tend to recruit?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, given that I came in July of 2022, and we're working with players that I didn't necessarily recruit. And so going into this recruiting season is much different than I'm going to predict going into the next recruiting season. I'm looking to bring in at least 12 players. So if you can only imagine how big of a class that is to bring in on top of the 16 that are already here, it is definitely about dynamic. So the people they are, making sure that we're bringing in quality people into our program. But also, of course, we're looking for players that have a high soccer IQ, or IQs that we can build upon. And when I think about what that means, I think of ceilings. Have they reached their ceiling? And as you recruit, and then as you become more experienced within the recruiting piece of it all, and you talk to their coaches and all that fun stuff and make connections, their ceiling is basically what is their level of growth. And so I'm always looking for players that have a high ceiling, essentially, and I'm going to continue to push them and make them uncomfortable, and that's how they're going to grow, and that's okay. And we accept in this program that we can do hard things. That's something that we talk about all the time, whether it's on the pitch or off the pitch. But this season, I've been pretty position specific, but what we really need, and all I know is transparency, really, what we really need is our soccer players that are well-rounded, that understand that, when they ask me on recruiting calls, so what formation do you play? Well, we play multiple formations. It just is depending on the opponent and who is healthy, essentially, for us. And so being adaptable is one of the biggest pieces in the recruiting process for us. So when I'm watching club teams play multiple times, or when I'm at a showcase or whatever it is, I try to see they have their primary position, of course, which is what they email you, but what's the secondary positions that you play? What's the third position that you play? And how do you adapt within game to the change? And so I personally think formations are just a starting point on the field, and that's fine. And so really understanding what spatial awareness is, how they work amongst each other, because it's different from personnel to personnel. But yeah, no, I mean, it's pretty, to me, in my eyes, it's very foundational, and then I can build upon that player when they come to Chicago State or wherever I may be. But right now, Chicago State. So yeah, so I think that it's, as much as I'd love to say in my mind that it's simple, it's sometimes hard to articulate, but that's exactly what I'm also learning in this new position, because I am a younger coach in the head coaching role, and so being able to articulate what I'm looking for instead of just being like, yep, that's her, that's them, I want them, right? It's really important, and I think that as I continue to build upon that, the program and the recruiting process will become better and better. So.
Absolutely, and that's such a interesting insight in terms of how you look at players, what you might want from them, adaptability in terms of having 2-3 positions, how they fit into a system, how they might have to adapt to that, and it's all key considerations, because sometimes when you go out recruiting, you might go, right, there's such a good technical player there, let's just get them in, whereas they might not have that soccer IQ, or they might be at that ceiling point, as you say, where they're not ready to learn, and it can be difficult then to work with them. And do they fit the program? Do they fit your typical profile in terms of what you want at Chicago State, for example, or if it was a different college, etc. And it can be a lot of variations when it comes down to it. So when it comes down to selecting these players, it's obviously a difficult process, and it's not the easiest. But when you have such a wide range of players available, then it does end up being a little bit easier, because you have such a wide selection, and you're not limited on going, we have to select these players, or we can go over here. But then flipping it back, it can also be difficult because you have so many players to look at.
Right. And I think that's when like your conversations with club coach, with them specifically, like I am all about relationships and I love building those relationships. On my first like recruiting call with any player, I literally say, "Hey, this is just the foundation to our relationship. I just want to get to know you. Tell me more about yourself. What do you do?" Right? Like it's seeing like how well one we get on because I want to know who I'm coaching. Should they come and they want to know who's coaching them, right? So like that's the most important piece is do we get on right outside of soccer because um, soccer, in the sense, is very minuscule. This is I'm guiding them in these 4 years, maybe sometimes two if they're a transfer, for the next 40 in their life, right? And so I want to make sure that we as we continue to build upon our culture here, that we're also building that the traits of inclusiveness, of diversity, of love, support, right? Of course, healthy competition, all of that will come within. But is this player going to add to our culture or are they going to just coast through our culture? And you can do both, but I think it's just you become a very different person in the long run, a very different player essentially when you're adding to the culture here. So
And it's important that you say that in terms of culture and those traits, and it's great that you differentiate between culture and traits because you might have a culture in terms of what you might instill, but the traits that you want on in a player might not fit their profile or something that has to be developed in their profile. And obviously, then when it becomes obviously a player platform where they're trying to select colleges and then trying to go right, this college might be offering me this compared to this, and they're trying to get themselves out there, which is so great. When they embed the culture into in terms of what they want, and then 10 years pass, and you've done your bit, and they've had those experiences, and they can still relate to their teammates, and they got those relationships, and they can text you back, and there's that maintained. Then they can sort of move on and look past and go, do you know what? I was part of that culture. I can always be proud of saying I played for Chicago State, and that ingrains it in all of them because as we say, it can be player led in terms of the options out there, and you don't want them passing in 10 years time going, that was just a stepping stone for me, because the more they ingrain it and take it on board, the more they become part of it and contribute towards that, because if you've got 13 new players, you want them to contribute massively towards the culture because it's going to be focused around them over the course of the season essentially.
absolutely. And I think when rebuilding a program, like those are just like that's of course the key thing you hear everyone speaking about, right? Is culture, culture. How are we doing it, right? And like this team, to be fair, like I was their third head coach in 6 months. So if you could only imagine, right, the lack of trust, which is
Yeah.
fair, totally fair, um, taking place in the fall and how you have to just slowly but surely work your way in, right? But also like being vulnerable. I also too have to be vulnerable. And is that something super comfortable? No, but I have to gain their trust, right? And I will do whatever it takes to get to that point because once we all feel like we trust each other, right? What's the next step? Okay, how do we love each other? Okay, cool. How do we support each other? Okay, cool. So then how do we play for each other? Okay, how do we win together, right? So and how do we lose together? So there are steps to it, and that's what we're slowly building upon, right? I mean, we've only been here for what is it now, 6, 7 months. So like, I mean, we're slowly but surely. But the players that we have committed right now, and those that we're in serious conversations with, are players that we know like wholeheartedly are going to add to that culture and continue to build upon what we're seeking to build.
Of course. So when you do have those players coming in and you create that culture, then do you have like a series of activities based upon integrating players then, such as team building, or is it just get started on the grass and then build it from there?
No, so what is really cool though about Chicago State is one, we're extremely diverse. Like we come from all over the place. We're from Germany, from Spain, from Mexico, from the United States, from New Zealand, and so we are extremely diverse in that sense. But when you start to think about the intricacies of diversity, they have friends. And then their friends like, well, I want to be a part of that. Okay, well, I want to be a part of that, right? And so that's what's kind of happening right now. Is that those that are here and those that are dedicated to rebuilding this program, that are committed to our process, they are like, hey, coach, I have a player. Like, I think she'd be really good here. Blah blah. Okay, great. Like, send me your contact info. If she has any footage, tell her to send it to me. And that's how we have actually our two spring recruits here, or spring commits here. So the two that have transferred in the spring are actually friends of teammates who happen to also be wonderful soccer players and wonderful people, who we've added to this team. And so it just depends, right? Like if I was bringing in a team, a brand new 12 that didn't know anybody, right, on the current team, then that's a different way to go about things. But still, like, we do team bonding events, such as I sat them down in the preseason specifically, and we continue to talk about it. But it wasn't a personality test, but it was like a color trait test. And you could be green, you could be gold, you could be blue, and you could be orange. And all of those are different types of personalities.
Yeah.
And so, like, your oranges are the ones that are more like go with the flow, like whatever happens, happens, like it's all good, right? But they want to be spoken to, like softly, kindly. Like when I'm giving constructive criticism, it's, hey Sarah, like, and I don't have a Sarah on my team, but hey Sarah, I saw when you did this, and you explained to me why you did this, and then we're gonna talk through, right? Instead of me maybe being able to talk to a gold where it's like, hey, no, I need this in this moment, where you can, when you lay this ball up, I need you to spin out, and they're like, got it, coach, got it, right? So there's just different ways of communicating, and that's what we were lacking, because they didn't really know each other when we came in the fall, which was incredible because they loved each other. But it's different to love each other and then to really know each other and how to speak with one another. And so that's just one team bonding exercise that we do where they find their color traits, they go with their colors. I have them talk to them, tell me more about it. What do you need from us? How do we communicate with you? How do you want to communicate with other people? And so it's that was really helpful because we talk about it all the time. Like in training, I don't know, blues are very sensitive, and so you have to go about that in a delicate way, of course, too. And so somebody said something to one of my blues, and they just go, "Hey, I'm a blue. I need better than that." Right? Like, and you're just like, okay, we got it. And so those small things that like actually end up building the bigger picture, because of course communication is key, are just one piece of like how we continue to bond with from within.
I truly love that, and it's great that you mentioned personality and how you communicate with different needs of your players, because they have all different traits in terms of what they want to understand, how they get things out of the game, how they might want to be coached, how they approach those relationships. If they're not reacting to something or have reacted, then obviously there's two different variations of that. And it's understanding the behaviours behind it, how they might perceive something. And I know that we've done something similar. So I was quite lucky to have two assistant managers at one of the teams I was at. One of them was a very good salesman, and part of his background and training was personality tests to understand people to obviously try and sell to them. So we integrated that in terms of the football team then, and we took it on board, and we created personality tests then, and then we created the mentorship program whereby we split 3 groups across us as coaches, and then those players would respond to us, and we'd be the mentors of that would try and fit into those personalities. So it was a great way to try and understand our players and understand, right, this player might not have this relationship with Coach Dan, but they got a relationship with Coach Luca, and then it was sort of creating those interrelationships then, and where there might be a bump in the road between Coach Dan and say player Joey, I could try and smooth that bump over in the road and create that triangle of awareness then, and create a support network, and then create that dynamic across a team. So it's a really interesting dynamic in terms of that personality and understanding players. So it's great that you have it as team building, because obviously when you have, say, 13 new players come in, they all got different personalities, different needs, wants, and what their goals and objectives might be. So integrating them in terms of what then the Chicago State University might want from them, in terms of their own expectations, in terms of your coaching expectations, the style of play, and then obviously, you know, everything else that surrounds the external environment. There's a lot to take on board, especially as they integrate themselves into that. So, you know, it's a great path that you're creating essentially over a course of a season that's going to benefit them.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you talked about like the different relationships amongst player and staff members, because that's important. Like, we'd be silly to think, right, that we're going to get on with all 32 of our players. That's a lot of, the first off, it's a lot of people to manage. And second, like, that's again a little silly. I mean, at one point in California, I was coaching 4 club teams and a college team, right? Like, I would be so, like I said, silly to think that I would get on with all, what is that, 100 and something players, right? That's totally fair. And so when you can like continue to grow that relationship with your staff and just be transparent and upfront, like, hey, I'm going to need a little bit more help with so and so, like, and just building that relationship. So can you continue to build upon yours, and then I'll continue to build upon it. But like, I'm assuming that you're going to be the person that they're going to be the most comfortable coming to. So just let me know how I can help and support that relationship, and support this player as best as that we can, and go from there. So I love that you said that, because that's really important.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And then when you sort of create that environment and you create your high expectations as such, it can be difficult then, because we want to set the high expectations, we want the players to attain it. But depending on the personality of a player, if you want to give them feedback after a game, one player might have a personality whereby they're right, give me everything so I want to learn, so then I can go straight into training on Monday and I comply. Whereas one player might be going, no, game's over, don't talk to me about it, let's just go with training later on in the week. And it's about understanding that, because if you go to that player who doesn't want to know about the loss after the game and isn't ready to talk about it, they could snap essentially. And then you're not in a place to try and move forward. You've got to then try and rebuild that bridge to then get back to where you were about talking about that game itself, before then moving forward with everything else. So it's quite interesting, because I got two players in my mind which I had exactly like that. And the one was learn. Every question about feedback, every question about bad performance, would really take it on the chin if they lost. Whereas the other player would take a loss on the chin and sometimes be really gruntled by it, but 90% of the time would be happy to brush off a loss and go, do you know what, football's football. But he didn't like to have that feedback every time. He had to do it on his own terms, and it was quite an interesting taking teams to then that environment around it, because as much as we had high expectations, and at times he would literally limbo under the high expectations, he had a personality whereby football wasn't everything for him, and it was just a passive hobby, rather than the other player who wanted to take it in a stride, has the objective of being a professional footballer. So then it's about understanding that balance between the team dynamic then, where we can fit all these personalities in to meet their needs in terms of that example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that one of the most important pieces when it comes to like being the coach on the other side of that, right, is like what boundaries are we drawing though also? Because I mean, I as a player and even as a coach will take a loss right on the chin, and I'm also one that's like, I need time to process what just happened. And so I don't want to talk about it right now. It's taken a long time to get to that point, because when I first started coaching, I was like, I want to talk about it. I got to figure this out. But the boundaries that I continue to draw with my team is like, hey, let's take 24 hours. Let's chill for a second. We're gonna figure this out. We all saw the same thing, right? We're gonna watch some film tomorrow, and we're gonna talk about it, right? I think it's incredible that the pathway to emotional maturity that sport brings. And I think that drawing boundaries like this is really important. Like I said, we're also guiding them for the next 40 years of their life, right? Like, so how do we handle these moments of adversity, although said and done, right? And it is sport, but like how can we continue to guide them through processing correctly, instead of just automatically, like, I don't know, maybe coming for someone's head. It's like, no, there's 11 of us on the pitch and there's 26 of us right here all together, so let's talk about it, right? Like, so like continuing to, and I think that's just really important for me in my coaching style, are the boundaries when it comes to that stuff. Because you're right, like even as a player I wanted to know right away, and then I learned as I went on, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe my coach isn't ready to even talk about it yet, right? Like, okay, well, maybe my teammates aren't ready to talk about it yet. Okay, cool, I need to just take a step back. So I've kind of like tried to like pull off from like my own experiences as a player, because I was definitely that player, to try and like reach as many of my players as possible. And with that, essentially came drawing that boundary of 24 hours, right? And so I think that it's just, but as you know, like as you continue to say, it's so important to understand who you're talking to, because that might change. Like somebody might just come up and ask questions, right? So like, okay, great, let's just chat about it, right? So I don't know. I think it just is dependent upon, but I like I said, I love to draw those boundaries because it gives everyone some time to like relax and process.
Of course, and then it creates a good relationship at times amongst your teammate, because you know, as you say, you might do a team bonding session, or you might do something after a game, depending on a full-time program whereby instead of having an analysis session looking back on the game itself, you might just go, right, let's switch off, let's just go and play some pool for the hour, or let's just do something away from it, and suddenly then you can open up a player to start going, well, what about this bit in the game, rather than having to sit in a formal environment where you're addressing those situations. So sometimes it doesn't always have to be on a foot pitch, doesn't have to be in that formal environment where you've got a PowerPoint up, everyone's sat in front of you. Perhaps just doing it around the pool table, or something where it destabilizes that pressure and opens up the personality of the others. You can really get into that conversation. So I think environment's really important, but then it's what you do on and off the field around the players whereby you can really get through to them and work with them, which is so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think like And I think it's funny when they go, "Hey, coach, like, can we have a one-on-one session?" And then I'm like, "Okay, well, is it physical? Do you want to go out to the pitch, or do you want to watch film?" And some of them like have never heard that question before. And it's like, okay, well, these are the different ways we're gonna be able, one, to get on the same page, but two, continue to build our relationship, and three, understand essentially how we're trying to play the beautiful game of soccer, because it is a big puzzle, and we're always trying to solve the puzzle every day, right? So it's the different approaches, like you talk about, to specific players, like to certain players, because each player is different. So yeah, no, you're totally right.
Absolutely, and when it comes down to it, it's understanding those players is really important, because what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and what might work over a season. And then that's where it becomes an interesting concept in terms of coaching, because the university might have certain KPIs for you to achieve, but then you've got your own style of play, your style of approach, your essential playbook, whereby you might have these high standards, where it could be high standards focused on player development, and these players get a scholarship program, or they get funding to go abroad, sponsorship, or semi-pro, and that, as long as they're developing and following a pathway that might fit your playbook. But obviously, the university might go, right, we need 10 players to meet a professional contract status, for example. But then it's how you create that environment over a period of time, and how your playbook might adapt. But then away from university, as you continue to move around, you still got your playbook to you, regardless whether you go into club, regardless whether you go into a different university, whether you're national, and you might attain high standards, or it might be about player development, or it might be that mix of both. So when it comes down to it, if you were taken out of the university and you had a selection of jobs across America, and you could bounce around and move, would your playbook stay the same for you, or would it adapt depending on your team, whether you wanted to win more trophies, or it's more about player development or competitiveness, or how would it adapt, or would it stay the same?
I think that I think that my coaching foundation would stay the same. I'm as a even as a university coach, I'm very adamant about player development. I don't think it ever stops. Like, just because you made it to Division 1 women's soccer doesn't mean that your development stops, right? And so we're keen on player development. Like, we'll take it back to I don't know, a three-person passing in a row, and the person in the middle is the one turning, but they're checking their shoulder to see what number their teammate is holding up, right? Like, we'll do the simple pieces, because actually the simple pieces create the bigger picture. If you can't pass a ball 10 yards, then I can't move. I can't move on, right? Like, we have to continue to talk about the smaller moments within game. And so whether I was coaching club or whether I was coaching in college, I think that the foundation remains the same, and I'm just wholeheartedly actually a really competitive person, so that will never leave, right? Like, and that will always be integrated into what we're doing. And like I said, player development will always be integrated, and I think that just like I think the approach might become a little different, right? Like, maybe it's maybe it's as my approach is simple as my tone, right? Depending on what my expectations are, given whoever I'm working for, right? And so it just depends. But I think that the coaching foundation itself remains the same, because I as a person won't change who I am. I'm gonna go coach other people, right? And so and it's just, like I said, all dependent upon expectation, but nothing truly changes. My philosophy I think will remain the same, and of course, as I continue to grow in this profession, it'll change. And I think that the approaches will change, like I said, pertaining to situations. But other than that, yeah, no, I think the foundation remains.
And I love that you talk about that foundation, that philosophy, and how it stays the same, and that it might grow over a period of time. But in terms of that, then, what are the core principles of your coaching foundation and philosophy?
Oh, I love that. Well, first, I'm coaching people, and so when it comes to my philosophy, the first and foremost, like, most important piece to me, like I mentioned before, are the relationships that I built within. Second, it's making sure that we're surrounding that I, as the manager, essentially am surrounding my players and putting them in the environments that will best benefit them. When it comes to we talked about what I specifically look for in players, and so that's been said. But when it comes to my approach to coaching, everything can be a conversation. I'm teaching them essentially, no matter what level we're playing. They're gonna know options A and B, and my job is to show them options C, D, and E. Right? Like I'm here to break down the smallest bits of detail, so that way they understand how we get there. And I'm extremely detail oriented, and sometimes it might bore my players, but that's okay. Like I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with sitting in uncomfortable moments and having them sit in uncomfortable moments with me, because uncomfortability provides growth, right? And so I'm always about the growth mindset. Like I'm pretty sure if I could just have my like coaching philosophy and then like semicolon, it'd be like growth mindset, because that's it. Like, and I'm also growing as I continue to tell you too. Like I'm growing in this. Like I will scrap a session in front of my entire team if I don't like the way it went. If it's not flowing, that's not fair to them, right? I need to give them the best I can give them. And if this rotation doesn't work, I'm gonna say stop. Like you could ask anyone, stop. I'm gonna fix this real fast. Do you have any input about how we can fix this? Yeah, coach, let's try this. Let's like move it this way. Okay, great, let's do it. Right? I'm very interactive with my team, and I think that's really important because I'm human just as they're human, and this sport, beautiful sport, is the piece that's bringing us together, right? But like again, I want after they're done playing for me in 4 years, in 2 years, if I'm with a club team, right, and I have them for 3 years every rotation, I want them to still like reach out if they need anything, whether it's pertaining to soccer, if they go on and play USL or pro, right? If I want them to reach out pertaining to life, right? And I want them to see that through my coaching and through interactions. Like I don't know everything, and it would be silly to think that I did, right? And so, and no matter what age, and I still sometimes, it's so funny actually. I was listening to this podcast about he's like the most winningest coach in, I forget his name, but most winningest coach in NCAA collegiate sports, and he's a squash coach. And he goes, I still have imposter syndrome, and I've been doing this for like 60 years. Oh my gosh, yeah. And when I heard that, I just like snapped it up in the car. I'm like, yep, I do too, right? Like, but it's so funny because when you talk to other head coaches, they're just like, yeah, like, what are we doing? Like, so like as I continue to grow, my team is gonna see me grow too, because that's really important. Like I'm also human, and they are too. So I think that's the true foundation to my coaching philosophy, is that we're humans, and it's interactions. The interactions really, really matter, and I'm going to get you there. Don't worry, I'm going to get you there. But again, it's a lot pertaining to the relationships that we build, and the trust that we build with each other. And so that's kind of where I'm going within my philosophy. And like I said, I'm still finding ways to like articulate what that means, because I am a doer. And they will feel I'm very empathetic in that sense too. But again, I will raise standards and I will get you there. So yeah, that was a long answer, but that's kind of where I'm going with it.
No, but it's a great answer, and it's great to sort of get that insight and the reasons as to why you might have particular principles within that philosophy to really understand them. Because sometimes you might meet coaches and they might lay out their principles, but you might never really understand why the principles have come from. So in terms of that, when you've developed your principles, and obviously there's a lot of player focus, a lot of the human element side of it, which is incredible, and what you want in a coach. Where do you think a lot of that has stemmed from? Do you think it's part of your natural personality, where you've worked with people? Do you think it's where you've grown towards people over a period of time? Is it because of the family element? There could be many things that shape your philosophy, but where do you think it's essentially come from?
So when I was playing in at my university, I was 100% a leader, but I would totally say now, and excuse my language, I was probably like the asshole leader. Like I was always going to be the one that was going to hold you to a higher standard, and my tone probably wasn't the best coming out. But I would always, like, after training, go up and be like, hey, like, please don't read into my tone. This is just what I meant. And they're like, Lonnie, you're fine, right? Like it's all good. Like I know what you needed from us. And after I was done and I started coaching club soccer, it was it was a it was a different approach to competitiveness. I had like a third team. It was of course all about player development, which I was super excited about. But when you're coming fresh out of competing in collegiate sport, and then you step into coaching 8-year-olds, right? That's a hard space to kind of like navigate as a new coach, especially when you truly have never dabbled in coaching before. And so at the same time, though, I was asked to come on to staff at the university that I actually played at. So I was super excited to now represent my university on the other side of it all. And so with that opportunity, I was able to watch. So let me let me go back for a second. When my senior year, we had a coaching change, and Robin Hart came in with Mary Whistler and Jacob Pickard. And that dynamic within the three was incredible, like incredible to see. Because Robin was like, you're the hard ass, like she was gonna get you there no matter what. Mary was like very empathetic, like could reach you in a different space, like one space that I've never actually experienced. And Jacob was very like tactical. He'll tell you what we need, how we're gonna do it, and so the balance between the three was incredible to me. Like it was something I've never seen in my life. And then to see them like just interact with us, which don't get me wrong, the coach that I came to play for initially, she was wonderful, and so was the assistant Z, but it was different. This was different, and so I always wondered like, how could I get there? Because I can be the hard ass, but I also want to be empathetic, and I also want to be really good at the tactical piece of it all, right? And I think soccer will come because just based off experience, and then I just love to learn, so like it never stops. But this piece of balance between being like very competitive, very I'm gonna get you there, we're gonna hold these standards, to also being like, hey, it's okay, like empathetic, I'm gonna reach you a different way, was something so eye-opening to me, and I think is something that I will never ever truly probably understand how I got there, but I'm just a sponge when it comes to people's own experiences and mine, that seeing how it benefited the program, they took them after I had left after like a year or two, but they took that program to their first national tournament. Like, and so when you think about the success that they experienced and how the culture changed from when I played to when I was on a coach to when I left, was like it was again incredible. That's like one word that I can't even help but explain it with, because of the balance. And so I think when it comes to the human interaction, that's kind of like where I learned that piece of balance. Like, and then when it came to still having high standards, and you can still be a hard ass and compete and hold them to it, right? Like that's the balance between the two is something I've worked on since my time at East Bay, and I think it's only been beneficial. I'm continuing to learn new ways to evolve with it, because as generations evolve, you have to evolve. And I think right now I'm just in a different space being a part of the generation that I'm coaching. So that will come, but the next generation coming through, how does it change, right? And like, I want to continue to adapt in that sense. But still understanding when I walk into the room, right? Coach is here, we got to compete, but also if we have any questions, she's extremely approachable. We can talk to her, right? Like all that stuff. And so I think that it's just based off experience. And my family, of course, has played a big role in that too. My dad was extremely competitive. And my mom is very giving. She's very giving to everyone. And so I didn't find that balance, like I said, with them necessarily. But as I continue to look back, I'm like, okay, like I can see that. But really where I found that was when I was on staff at East Bay. And that's kind of just propelled me into where I'm at right now.
And it's great to understand again that philosophy and how you've built that over a period of time, and where you've taken bits from your mum and your dad, and how you've taken bits away from being a player, how you've grown as a coach, how you've adapted, how you've developed that balance in terms of that empathy and taking things away. Because, you know, some coaches might be in that environment where it's all about high standards, and naturally they've been influenced over that period of time, and then when they transition from player to coach, their environment and standards is high performance and high standards. And when it comes down to that, it's difficult for their players to adapt into, and they don't always adapt into that. Whereas you might have some players then, when they transition from player to coach, even though they've been in high standards, high performance environments, they want to completely flip that on its head and go, well, here's the high performance and high standards that we can achieve, but it's going to be this philosophy on player development, which sounds a lot like what you're doing. Whereas
Right.
other coaches will go high performance, high standards, everything else is secondary. You have to achieve these minimum. And a key manager or someone in my mind is Roy Keane. So a very amazing player for Man United, achieved a lot of the big accolades in the world, played international football, won Premier League titles, Champions Leagues, and really set the bar as a player. But when he transitioned into being a manager, he set the expectations so high because he was in that environment, that when he dropped down to the lower leagues and with players who were not perhaps of the standard that he was, he found it really difficult then to coach them and work with those players, and those players found it hard to react and build that relationship with him. So therefore, that success wasn't achieved. So it was great that he went in and wanted to raise the standards, but then because he didn't have all the other traits and skill set to create that balance and to get through to his players, understand the personalities, and maybe coach them in different ways to get them to those high performance, that's when they didn't perform for him, and then he got the sack, and there was no real outcomes for that team and those players, and they just look back in terms of being unhappy because it was all about discipline, and it didn't work for them, and it was difficult then because the manager got it wrong, the players didn't respond to it, and then essentially it became a difficult period of time, and the club had to transition again, looking from the outset. But it's a real interesting take when you look at a manager, look at their personalities, look at the environment, high standards, how their philosophy has been shaped, how they might go in and approach new players, how players will react, and that's why it's so great to sort of understand the philosophy of every coach and how that might change and adapt over a period of time. Because when I talk to the coaches, I always got in the back of my mind that coaches will be listening to this and they're going to relate to it. So I want them to understand what their philosophy is about and that they can adapt, that they can change, as much as they might have principles which are not which can't be changed for them and our core. It doesn't mean that although you have discipline as one of your principles, that not every minute of every session or contact with a player has to be about discipline. You can change that in many different ways and forms, and you can blow it up in many different ways that you want to.
Absolutely. And I love that you talked about like the transition into specific environments, because to be fair, my transition into onto the East Bay staff, we were rebuilding. That's what we were doing, right? So like we have to be realistic, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces is being realistic with who you're working with, right? Like I'm not working with I don't know, Man City women. Like that's not who I'm working with, right? I'm working with Chicago State. And so to treat them as if they were right of a higher standard, or sometimes coaches go even lower, right? Like, and it's not realistic. And so I think that I was lucky to come into an environment where rebuilding was the and player development was the main focus. And I think that that walking into, because the next step was going into a program where they were continuously successful. It was a different environment, right? Like there were standards. It was fun, like especially as being as competitive as I was, but it was just different. And then stepping into the Chicago State environment brings me a lot of like flashbacks to East Bay's environment. And so I think that I'm actually really lucky that the first environment that I walked into as a coach was a rebuild, because it just set, like I said, realistic expectations. We focused on player development in a competitive realm, which I think is wonderful, which of course is a part of my philosophy. But like, yeah, I think that the environment that you step into is extremely crucial, especially coming from player to coach. So.
And when you talk about that player development and you do have that focus and you were rebuilding, do you have a certain metric or system then whereby you would track player development and growth?
Yeah, we're slowly but surely working on that piece, because that's what the spring is about for us. And so sitting them down, talking, like having them set long-term goals, short-term goals, and plan about how we're going to get there for individual player development is going to be important for us, and that's what we're starting on. And then team development is something that Grace, my assistant, and I are continuing to talk about, but we're also, of course, going to have a conversation with the team and set short-term goals, long-term goals, and then plan how we're going to get there. And so that's really, like I said, that's really what our spring is about, is player development. And of course, like I've said before, in the fall when we're competing and all that fun stuff, player development is still a part of it. But this is where we actually lay the foundation of what we need from each player playing each position. And sometimes, most times, the players that we're bringing in play multiple positions. So, hey, guess what? You've got some homework to do, right? And so setting those expectations about positional responsibilities, personal responsibilities, because each player is different, and then sitting down and making sure that we all understand, and I'm talking as a team, what those responsibilities are. I've given them so many, like I've written out positional responsibilities for a 4-4-2 diamond, for a 4-4-2 flat, for a 3-5-2, for a 4-2-3-1. They have all the tools that they need, and now it's making sure that we are now actually putting in the work to understand why we're doing this. And so that's what our spring is really going to look like. And then, of course, like I said, we have games in April. And so we'll see how that all comes together and what we need to adjust, what's working for us, what's maybe not working for us, who we need to spend a little bit more time on, and all that stuff.
So it's really interesting in terms of what's up and coming and how it might look for the players, what changes you might make, and how different the team might be over a period of the season in terms of the personnel that's available to you, in terms of how you approach the games. And it's great that you talk about adaptability and systems and having that specific cards and resources that you've made. Is there typically two different styles that you might play with? So you might play with a 4-3-3 and then switch to a 4-4-2, or do you tend to be over a season you might play 10 different shapes because of the players? Is there a typical shape that you tend to play, or?
Yeah, I mean, this last season we played a 4-2-3-1. We are prone to giving up goals, so we needed a four back, and I specifically wanted two sixes. One that could drop into the back line we talk in phases. So once they crossed into like they phase three, they dropped into the back line and became a five back, and then the other six would jump like slide central a little bit more central and create almost like a diamond, or sometimes it's just a triad, a relationship. And that just helped us like essentially when anchoring and taking on pressure, because we were under pressure a decent amount this last season. But I mean, we played a 4-4-2 diamond. I think that with the diamond, it was fun. We didn't have a lot of depth though. And so I had to change it so that way we understood I could manage personnel a little better. We only had a roster of 22, and we had three keepers on the roster, and so we didn't have like I said, a ton of depth. And so to making sure that body management was first and foremost within games was really important, because we were playing like Friday, Sunday, and then we were on the road for 15 out of 19 games. And so body management was extremely important, which was a big reason why we changed into a 4-2-3-1. When we could, we would switch the formation into a 4-3-3. I also love playing like a lopsided 4-3-3, which sometimes I guess you could say looks like a 3-5-2 a little bit. But like it depending on how we rotate. But yeah, no. It's just like I said in the beginning, I think formations are the starting point. And so as we continue to work with the team that we have now and bring in our next set of recruits or commits, it's awareness, it's soccer IQ, it's what's the triggers, right? Like we're already talking about if this player moves, if our 7 is stepping to their outside back, what's the trigger for our 9, for our 10, for our ball side 6, right? And so making sure that we have players that are able to take in that information, execute the information, ask questions if they need to ask questions, and then like give other solutions. Like what else? Like tell me more. What do you? Hey, like Sarah, like do you have another way to solve this? Well, coach, maybe I do. What if I go here and then the 9 steps here, right? Like, so it's like interactive. It's really interactive. But I think it's just, yeah, I don't know. I think I just lost my train of thought because I get so excited. But to come back to the formation piece, yeah, no, we played about 2 different formations, maybe 3 sometimes, but it just depended on who we were playing and what personnel was healthy for us too.
And in terms of that, then, do you tend to be adaptive towards players in terms of personnel, fitness, etc.? So would you be more attacking depending on the players, or more defensive, or does your style tend to be more of that anyway, or more balanced?
I think this last season it was a little bit more balanced. But definitely depending now that we know who's coming in, I think what everybody would love to be is more heavy on the attacking side, right? And so finding the personnel and the solutions to do that. But I was a defender during my time. And so the defensive pieces are extremely important to me. And so I would love to come away from that going forward a little bit, just because those foundations have been set, and set in stone. We've done so much with it, and kind of focus more on the attacking side of it all, and giving solutions to that. But yeah, I think it is just definitely dependent upon, like you said, personnel coming in, and it just depended on where we were at in the game. Was it the 75th minute? Was it the 85th minute? Right? Is it the 40th minute and we want to push, right? Like it just depends, honestly, and it also depends on who they have on the field too. So like some of my substitutions were also based upon when they were subbing theirs, and that just I just saw that off of film. Like, okay, she's coming off in about 25. That's fine. So I'm gonna start you off, and I'm gonna put you on when she's not on, and see if that gives us something different. And so yeah, that's kind of just how I approach body management and formations and what we need in specific moments of the game.
And it's such an interesting concept in terms of how you approach it and how, you might set your team up to play in terms of your style adaptation, setting up for the team, whether your principles remain the same, whether they're interchangeable, etc. Because if we take, for example, Diego Simeone of Atletico Madrid, he is defensive, 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 no matter what the personnel of the team are, no matter how the opposition will play, it is defensive for every game. So when he signed João Felix, who was a very attacking player, he had to then essentially go in, João Felix, and then become very defensive minded and sit back, and it sort of depreciated him from his attacking ability at times because he was quite limited. So it was quite difficult for him to fit into that system, and no wonder he's gone out on loan as a result of it. So it's quite interesting in terms of that, taking when you set up a team and you've got the personnel, whether you adapt it towards the personnel or whether the shape might change, or whether you might bring on Shao and go, right, we might flip into a 4-4-2 and he's going to be a high attacking Cam, where we're going to have then a 9 sat in front, for example. But in terms of Simeone, it would be the same shape, and he would have to come on and play that same role. So it's quite interesting in terms of how you explore that and how you approach that with your players.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, okay, we could take forwards for example, right? Not each game fit each forwards. So like it's just gonna be different. But when I sub on, I don't know, when I sub on so and so, the game changes for us, maybe because she's a little bit more mobile. Or maybe because she's not maybe she's not a hold up nine, right? Maybe she's a pure striker, right? Like, and so it will definitely change, but what we understand as a team is that when we do make those changes, it shouldn't be a surprise. As one, you've been training with this player this entire season. Two, because we've relayed that information to you. This is how our style will now change given the personnel that's on the field. And so that could happen. That could happen at the center back role, right? I had a center back who just liked to anchor, which was fine, but I also had another center back who loved to drive into that midfield space, and that's what I also. It just depends on what the game is giving you and how, specifically with the center backs, right? How their nine might be pressing, right? Like, and so it just is all dependent. It's all adaptable, but that's what brings me back to triggers. Is like when this happens, what do we do? And that's when we have the ball, and that's when they have the ball. And so making sure that we're all on the same page with those pieces is crucial to solving this puzzle that we play every day.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to that puzzle and the way that you set up a team, and although you might be university based and player development, would you say over a 10-game period, the core of your team would be very much the same? Or would you say over a 10-game period, if you looked back on it, every game would sort of be a very different team?
No, it was pretty much the same. But that was also, like I said, we had a smaller squad. Typically, like college teams carry between 28 and 30 on average. We have 22. And so this last season, it was definitely steady with who it remained. The starting lineup essentially remained. But what I'm super excited for the fall is to have different types of players that could give something different each game. And maybe that changes. But that's what's super exciting about competing at training is who is it going to be, right? And does this game fit you, right? And do you fit the game? That's going to be really important as we continue to have those transparent conversations, because it's not easy, right? Like if you're an incredible player but the game just didn't fit you, like that's okay, like it happens. But I know sometimes that's hard to take on as a player in the moment, and so continuing to have those conversations through training, putting them in those environments where I'm going to make them uncomfortable by maybe um, this isn't the most suitable environment, soccer environment specifically itself, aka the exercise, but let's see what we can do with it to help you grow, so that way you have more opportunity going forward in each game to fit into that game and the game fit you too.
Which is great to hear, and obviously how you approach it again. But do you find it then difficult to have that when you had that squad of 22, or did you find it more easier in just having 22 and having a core and then being able to adjust around it?
I think that in some moments when it comes to player management, it's easier because it's a smaller squad. But when you really need something to solve the puzzle and you don't necessarily have it, that part
Yeah.
became very difficult. And so, what are the other creative ways we can at least hinder, right? Like hinder what the problem is, or slow it down, or and so finding different ways to bring everybody's traits and specifically the core, right? Like, and we would, of course, anybody off the bench that could help contribute to this game, we would. But like trying to find different ways we can make each player's traits work together to solve that problem with a smaller squad was something that I literally dreamed about at night. Like it was like, how do we do this, right? Like, and so yeah, no, and I'm glad. I'm really lucky to have Grace. Grace also was a head coach at two institutions before, and so she's been in the same role as myself. And so being able to talk, have somebody, another soccer brain, essentially, another friend, another person to bounce ideas off of, was really important for us as we continue to solve each game.
Because it's not easy having a squad of a wide range of players or a limited squad, and as much as we might want a perfect number, it can be really difficult because you might have a good core of players who complement each other really well, bring out each other's qualities, complement each other, all about that growth and create that dynamic between them. You will have players who essentially don't fit into that category because they are lacking the quality at times, and that's the realism of sport. And then it's difficult to bring on those players because then you see a good player being brought off, so they're frustrated. Then you see the other players on the pitch looking around, going, "Oh, really? This player's coming on," and then this
Yep.
player's on the pitch and they're taking away valuable minutes. And as much as we then talk about player development, you got a switch on your hat where you're like, right, I need to bring this player off and bring this player on, but then I'm upset and it's such a difficult dynamic. And I know I'm the exact same with my team because we're looking at tomorrow and we're like, right, we could be in a position where we drop towards relegation. And as much as we talk about, I say relegation towards bottom of the table, our chairman's all about player development, player growth, and I'm like, right, I'm completely on board with that. I get that, but then it's difficult if we sit towards bottom of the table. Then the players, majority, are going to be upset because it doesn't represent the position of their hard work where they could actually be. So tomorrow, instead of going with a core team, we might have to mix it up to reach the balance, and then it becomes quite difficult because as much as we're looking at player development and their minutes and balance, etc., we're then taking away valuable minutes from the players that we could be excelling, the players who have done well to actually attain the starting spots, and then player development has actually hindered the player development in other ways. So it's such a difficult contrast when you're working with young players and when you have a squad and you're trying to focus on that player development and how you get it right in terms of that. So it can be quite difficult.
Right. And especially like for us in the fall, right? Like especially when results matter. Like that is a very difficult thing to balance. Like and it's something that I think changes from season to season, of course. And as I continue to learn and experience, right? Are there different ways to approach it? Maybe, but what I found to be the best way, especially for me, is to just be really transparent about my decisions, why I made those decisions, right? If they're asking, but sometimes I'm just like telling them too, like, hey, I know you didn't ask, but here's why I did what I did. And you might not be on the same page as me, but in the long run, I'm telling you that this is what I see, and this is what is going to be beneficial to us. And so the transparency piece, even if they might not get on with it, if they don't like what I'm saying, that's fine, right? Like, but at the end of the day, it's my name is on the bottom of the result paper, right? Like that, I have to do what's best for our
Yeah.
squad in this moment, and I have to take care of us in this moment, while also getting the results that we all want. Essentially, we all want it. So how are we going to get there, right? And so, yeah, I think that's an incredibly hard. That's one of the hardest pieces to balance in this realm.
And it's good that you talk about transparency because essentially it is big picture thinking. So instead of the player going, all right, the coach has brought me off again and here I am, or I'm not coming on, it's essentially going, you know what, I'm actually not being brought on because I know I'm not as good as the other players and I'm realistic in that and I might have to focus on what my objectives might be and my individual profile outcomes. But by being on the bench, not coming on, then we're going to try and get a result, and then you're actually contributing more to the team by not coming on, and you've had a part to play. And as much as it's difficult that you've lost out on those minutes, you have actually been part of it because we could bring on one player, and suddenly then the really quick winger beats this player, knocks in across, and suddenly we're 2-1 down in a game. We've lost the game 2-1, and then all the hard work of the core players that have been on has been undone. They're then frustrated, and then the dynamic of the group changes, and then it's a difficult position in terms of then the table and then everything else. And overall, that big picture turns from something that looked quite balanced to where a player might go, everything's bad, or it's bad here in terms of results, bad here in relationships, or we've lost this and we haven't got these players, and coach has made that decision to bring on them. And it can really spiral. And again, when it comes back down to that big picture thinking, we're trying to do it as best for the players, no matter how difficult it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, right? Like there were many games where we have some wonderfully talented forwards, right? But it's like, okay, but what are you doing defensively? Like that's what I need to know,
Mm.
right? Like, and of course, like I said, being somebody who's very focused on the defensive principles and how we incorporate them within our style of play, right? Like, I, there were moments where it's just like I can't, I actually just can't because we're gonna give up too much space. That's what I love for her to take that player on 1-1, absolutely. But on the other side of the ball, which is what we struggled with the most, I can't, like, and so that those pieces were hard to manage too because they bring something great to the table. But on the flip side, again, I'm looking for well-rounded soccer players. That means both sides of the ball, and that's how, like I said, we're continuing to recruit what what we need for the style of play that we want to play.
And do you find that difficult then in terms of the difference between being an assistant and head coach? So, the head coach, you might have that philosophy of player development, but then you are accountable for the results and trying to gain the results and make those tough decisions. Or do you find it easier or thinking of your own personality then, do you find it easier just to be an assistant and go, right, player development, focus on that. I can do this, I can do that, but the head coach is responsible for that. Did you find it difficult moving into a head coach role, or how do you find that then in terms of your own sort of outset towards being one or the other?
I think it. I think. I think when it comes to the assistant to head coach piece, I coached club the last like 4 years, and so as the head coach of a club team, you have that freedom, right? And I know club is very very focused on player development, which as it should be. Um, while also incorporating like the other aspects of my coaching, like being competitive, having high standards, all that fun stuff, right? So when I stepped into this head coaching role, I just thought about my experience as the head coach of a club team. And that's not to knock anything; it's just experience based. That's as close as I've ever been to being a like head coach. And so when I went from assistant to a head coach, nothing really changed because, like I said, I'm pulling from experiences from club where we are focused on player development, but now I was able to raise standards on the other elements of my coaching style, right? So like how competitive we're going to be, what standards we're going to raise, right? The accountability factors of it all, like how am I going to hold you accountable, right? Because club, you're like, hey coach, I'm not coming to practice today. Yeah, but in college you don't do that, right? Like that's not how this works, unless you have class, of course. But other than that, like I didn't find it extremely difficult to transition from assistant to head coach when it came to player development because that's just incorporated within my philosophy itself. So like it never changed. How what we were doing to approach player development changes, right? Like I mean, I've never this last season we like I said we were on the road for 15 out of 19 games. That is wild. We averaged about 2 training sessions a week. That is nuts. So sometimes, right, just for body management purposes, player development came from film, right? Like, and that's where it came from. It wasn't physically going out there and doing stuff. It was from film. Sometimes player development came from I don't like watching our men's team play. Let's just watch them. Let's see, like, free your mind in a way, but also watch the soccer that's being played. Okay, what are some solutions that you would come up with? Right, all this fun stuff. Or like on the road when we played on Sundays and we had some time, we're watching Premier League together, right? Or like so it's just or NWSL, and so like just there are different ways to approach player development, and it's all dependent upon schedule, of course, like personnel, right? Like maybe some people are in class, like a lot of people are in class, and I only have a smaller group. So okay, let's really dig deep into what player development means with you guys via film and technical stuff, right? So I didn't think it. Nothing really changed, honestly, in my mind, in my mindset from assistant to head coach.
So obviously you spoke about it when you was a player and you had that personality and that you were a leader. So it's always naturally within you where you wanted to be or where you might have ended up being head coach anyway because of who you were internally. And I know I really struggled to be an assistant coach because I know that's not within me because I want to be lead. I want to be accountable. I want to take the bad results. I want the good results. I'm happy to take it on the chin. And regardless of, if I could have, 10 games in charge and lose all 10 of them, it's difficult to have that position. And when you are accountable then and a lot comes with that, whereas I could go, do you know what, I could actually be an assistant, not be the one accountable for it and just focus on player development where I'm like, happy to take all that on board because it's within me to be a head coach. So I know some people, might climb the ladder naturally and then get the head coach and they're not built for head coach, or some people then go into being head coach and then realize assistant coaching is for them. So, finding that role which really works for you in terms of, when you work with players can be really important, because as you talk about this transition, and you might have had that group of players where they've gone through 3 different head coaches, that player development can be hindered in that sense because these head coaches have stepped into roles to try and progress elsewhere, or they've not been performing well, and then it becomes difficult for the players. So sometimes taking a step back and looking at yourself and remembering what our position might actually be, or the role more suited to us, can be more beneficial in that respect.
Yeah. And to be fair, like I really enjoyed my time as an assistant. And I'm enjoying my time as a head coach. I think where my mind takes me with that is like I have so much to learn still. Like I have so much to learn, and I can do that in this role. What I miss is like being able to watch somebody run a program, run a team, and learn about things that I like and I didn't like, and I can still do that, of course, with courses, with going out and watching club coaches work, or going out and just observing maybe other college coaches. But like I am just trying to live in this moment. I don't know what the future holds for me, and that's fine. Like I am adamant about how like my generation, this generation coming up, is so worried about climbing the ladder that they never really take a moment to be present. And that's what I want to do. I just want to be present. And one of my mentors, Kelly Lawrence, she goes, Lonnie, you're going to be in this profession for like 40 more years. Like, just take your time and enjoy what you're doing. And I really took that to heart. And so, although this move to head coach was surprising nonetheless, I'm really enjoying it. And I think it is my fit. When I start to think about, is my fit better as an assistant or a head coach, I definitely think, per my personality and my expectations and stuff, that it's definitely head coach. The head coach realm is where I would love to be. But I still have a lot of time, so who knows? But right now, what I'm doing is I'm going to live in the moment and enjoy my ride.
I love that, and it's about enjoying that moment, because sometimes you might want to climb that ladder too quickly, and then realize you're at the top of the mountain, and then there might be another mountain for you to climb, and then you're not, wholeheartedly, completely invested or wholeheartedly happy where you're at, because there's always something else, or you've done it too quickly. And I know I was listening to a podcast the other day where I've just taken a bit of that from, and he was talking about that too much too quickly and not living within that moment. And I know I can reflect back and look on it where I was quite a young coach. I got up to my coaching badges quite quickly. I had good experience, and then I was moving quite quick in terms of that ladder. But I'm at a position where I'm not where I perhaps would have wanted to be at 22, looking at where I'm at now in terms of my age, but where I am now, I'm like, do you know what? I'm actually quite happy. I'm enjoying coaching more. I'm enjoying life a bit more. I've got a bit more of a breather. It's a nice balance. So as much as I'm not where I wanted to be at 22, I'm actually a little bit more happier, and I'm gaining more experience, and I'm doing a lot more different things, and I'm networking with coaches. I'm learning from them. So although I'm not where I want to be, when I do eventually get where I want to be, I'll be a lot more knowledgeable and experienced because of it, rather than trying to race into it and essentially end up maybe in that role where you're accountable for a lot, but you're not really achieving a lot because you didn't have the right experience to fit into it, because you've ticked the boxes, but essentially you haven't got the paragraphs to go with it, essentially. So it's so important that you talk about finding yourself, having that right balance for you, that right time, and not having to rush too quickly, and just enjoying that space, because we could go up that ladder quickly, but we could have a space where we really enjoy, and then we've moved on really quickly and gone, do you know what, I actually wish I spent more time doing that.
Right. And I think like we talk about licensing and it's wonderful. I can't wait to get my next one, but it's the experience, right? Like what are we experiencing? Like you said, you could tick off all the boxes, check them all off, but like what have you experienced, right? And so that to me is like the biggest piece. Like of course I'm one that's just, let me get all my licenses right now. Okay, I gotta wait a year to get the next one. That's okay. Like I'm gonna do this, but it's also like just take a step back. You're gonna be here for so long, and like I think that's incredible that you've done all of that. I think that the experience piece, like you said, when you do reach the top of the mountain, what do you bring to the table other than just licensing, right? Like, and so incredible accomplishment in itself. But I think that as I continue to talk and surround myself with other coaches as well. Like one of our biggest pieces is how much we've experienced, and that's what we bring to the table, right? Like we from life to coaching to interacting with players, right? Whatever it may be, like it's the experience, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to gather right now.
Absolutely, and it's amazing that you are gathering that, and amazing that you've got that space and understanding, where you are going. Because once you sort of understand that process and what will work and what you want to achieve and what's within you naturally, and then progress it in terms of that player approach, how you work with the players and everything on the grass, it's going to help you grow a lot more towards those objectives and goals in terms of what you want to do, which is really fascinating. And then when this is one of thoughts that I've had. So as much as you might want to progress into a head coach and university, would you then want to progress into full-time professional coaching, or would you want to go national team? How does sort of coaching look for you? Is there a continuous ladder, or is there a point on the ladder where you go, do you know what, this is where I get off and I want to stay at this level?
Ooh, I love that question. And I think I don't know the answer to that question. I want at my mindset right now, of course, is always is high expectations, high standards, and so would I love to climb into um, first the Power Five realm here and for the universities, and then go maybe into professional coaching, and then, I don't know, maybe one day, right? Like the national team. Absolutely, like I'm a huge dreamer. That is absolutely what I want to do, right? But I mean, I don't know, right? In 3 years, right? What if I am in the Power Five realm and I'm like, ooh, this is just not for me, right? Like, and so I think it's gonna be the experience that I continue to to put myself into, right? Like, and see. I think we just have to see as we go, essentially, because my wife is also a soccer coach. She coaches at a Division 2 down the road, and she's like, I think this is it. Like, I think this is where I want to be. This is the realm I want to be in. I'm happy. I'm happy with the balance that I have. And so some people know, right? And that's wonderful, right? And we've even talked about, like, because we know that my next move will probably take us somewhere else, right? And she's like, well, I'm also okay with just coaching club too, right? Like, and so there are I'm sure there's a moment in our career where we're like, yeah, this is it, right? And sometimes it pertains, like it's is surrounding family, right? Like, do we want to have a family, right? And so there are different pieces to it, I think. But I mean, if I had to answer your question, yes, I would love to go into the pro realm. Is that going to be my fit? I don't know. And will I know that right now? No. It'll probably be the next stop in which I'll know what I want to do next or what I want to keep doing. And if it's not the next stop, then it's the next. Because remember, I have like 40 years in this profession.
Of course, and it's great that you have a wife that also coaches and can understand, difficulties of coaching, or where your motivations might drop off or pick up, or where you might not have a fit, and she might be happy, and even though you could be wanting to progress, she could be at a really happy phase, and she goes, you need to be happy and just slow down a little bit. So it's nice that you have someone who understands that and can really have those discussions with, and just settle down in terms of a conversation and go, right, what's this about? Where's coaching going to go for you? Where's it going to go for us? How does it look for you? And you can really shape your philosophies off each other, or take bits away. And it's, as much as she's learning, you're learning. You can build something together, which is really interesting. Do you find it difficult then at times, because you're both coaching, you're both traveling? Is that difficult in terms of the logistics at times then between a relationship? Not to hit too personal, but
Oh no, we're very open about how we go about this because it's different, right? Like, and okay, let's take for example the fall, right? Like I said, we were on the road for 15 out of 19 games. So I was gone sometimes from Wednesday to late Sunday. And we wouldn't see each other until essentially like be able to really talk and interact until Monday. And I think what we have is a mutual understanding of what this profession entails, and being in different divisions too. There comes different responsibilities, and we both know that mine's a tad bit more demanding in some moments of a season, and hers is more demanding than mine in some moments of a season. But we try our best. There we of course create boundaries. So if we're both home after, I don't know, 5:30, right, we're like, we're done talking about soccer, don't talk to me about work, right? Like, this is our time. And especially in this off season, we've talked about traveling. That's what we like to do, and so making sure that we're doing things for us outside of soccer, because even though we both are surrounded by soccer basically 24/7, it's not our identity. And that's not why we fell in love either. And so, as much as it plays a role, right, like we've got to do things for us. And so, we draw, like I said, we draw boundaries, we travel, we do things that we like. We like, okay, I shouldn't say we love, but we like to drink beer. So, going to different breweries and trying, like, that's what brings us joy. So, we do things that bring us joy with each other. And then it makes the season it a little easier. I mean, in that sense, right? Because we've filled our cup, and now we're gonna go work, 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 and that's totally fine for us.
And it's nice that you talk about that and what works and what works for you both, and um, enjoying those moments in terms of being away from soccer and doing other things in terms of what couples do, individuals. Because sometimes you might get with someone and they don't understand the coaching journey of the individual on that coach, because it is late nights, there is travelling there, our weekends away, then you are trying to connect with players late at night, or you're reviewing games and footage, etc. And they're like, why are you putting so much time in? Or does it have to be every night? Does it have to be every weekend? And coaching world doesn't switch off, and there's so many players, which we have, as you say, and you've got maybe 28 different personalities, so they might all contact you at different times. Then you've got the other club coaches and US coaches, recruits, university, games, management, etc., etc., etc. And then it can be difficult to maintain that relationship in terms of in terms of perspective of those listening, because they might be a young coach starting out on their journey, and a relationship isn't the easiest of things to maintain whilst on the way. And sometimes they might break down, and sometimes they might not work out. And as much as that is sad, it's also realistic to understand that they will, because it is a hugely demanding profession to go into.
Right. 1,010%. Like, I mean, any recruiting event, we're kind of bouncing off of each other, seeing if we can go together, and if we can't, we just can't. Right. If it's not my fit, then and it's hers, and she's got to go. Camps, right? Like when we get asked to work camps, it's like, as much as I would love to work camp with you, like it might not be the camp for me, right? Or it's like there are just different pieces, and you're so right. I think I'm so lucky to have somebody who is in this realm with me, who has experienced this realm longer than I have. Who understands what the demands are of it. But like I said, our foundation is key to how we go about it. Like we're best friends far before anything else, and so like even just like sitting on the couch in silence together, we're so happy. Right? Like it's just like so it's just the small things, right? And like even in season, like if she comes home. And I don't know, maybe I've got Chipotle for her, right? She loves Chipotle. So like it's just the small things that keep I guess you could say like your love ignited through some really demanding times is really important. But I am very lucky to have somebody who understands what the day in and day out life is kind of like for a coach.
And that is amazing, because you can just feel that energy, even though you're over in the US and we're on video call. You can just feel it come through, and it's so great that you have someone like that and the way you feel. And I love that you say little moments, because even if we take away from soccer and we look at relationships and just little things, I'm so all about the little things, and I think they absolutely work in terms of that. But it's incredible that you do have someone that you're on that relationship, and it does relate back to where you might be at a point where you might slow down and go, do you know what, I'm actually able to spend time with my loved one, spend time with the wife, spend time with you might be having kids at that point, and you go, do you know what, I can actually get home tonight and just switch off and watch a film together. Because you might not want to keep climbing the ladder, or the more that you do, the more that it takes away from the other things that you might want. So getting off at one point isn't a failure within your own step or your own career. It's going, do you know what, that actually works for me in terms of my professional career, but it also works in terms of my personal life. I'm happy to be here. And that space can be really truly niche to find, but once you find it, latch onto it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't know, right? There our kids maybe in our future, maybe. We're not like hard set on an answer, right? But maybe in a year or two that changes, and then that changes the path, like you said, and that's okay. And we're so open to that it's like whatever we want to do, then we're just gonna do it. Because again, at the end of the day, soccer isn't our identity, and it's what we're doing outside of it really that brings us a lot of happiness. Although soccer does bring us a ton, but it's the outside pieces. It's life, like it's life.
Absolutely, and it's incredible to speak to someone who's on that journey and is continuing to grow and has so much to do with it. And it's great to sort of share in terms of your philosophy, the outlook, how you approach work with players, relationships, what links that you have towards being a player, towards being a coach, the environments, dynamics, personalities, relationships, how that might look short term, long term, the ladder of success itself, the coaching foundation, philosophy, culture, traits, and there's all these things that I've just listed over a conversation that's lasted over an hour, and it's been incredible to have this hour with you and take away the conversation, because it's definitely one that I've been looking forward to for the last few weeks, and I'm glad that we could pencil it in. And I know that we've been going over an hour, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But before you go, I want to fire some quick fire questions at you.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so number one, if you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what would they be?
Competitive, outgoing, jolly.
Love them. Beautiful words. If you could move to any country to coach, where would it be?
Spain.
Love that.
Yeah.
If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Jurgen Klopp. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think he's fascinating. I think he's so fascinating.
There's so much to take away.
There's so many. I think his competitiveness really it intrigues me. But I think to be fair, I might be changing my answer right now. I would totally hang out with Pep, because I think the way he manages is marvelous. So I love them both.
That's great. 2 great selections of coaches. Even though I'm a Chelsea fan, I would, if the opportunity came up to go with Pep or to spend a day with Klopp, I wouldn't say no, because they're truly incredible, inspirational people, and Klopp is just so energetic. So.
Yeah, he's just real. Any press, he's like, we're humans. It's just yeah, we are. Thank you, Klopp. They're marvelous.
Absolutely. And this can relate to personal or professional. Who is your role model?
Oh, great. I would probably say Robin Hart.
Good answer.
Yep, she's wonderful.
Brilliant. If you could be, you were a player, but if you had the opportunity in front of you, you could go A or B, full-time professional career as a player or full-time professional career as a coach. Which one would you pick?
Player. Yeah, I miss it so much. Player for sure.
Love it. What is your number 1 top tip for any coach?
Be yourself.
Love that. Amazing answer. What is one job that you could take if you had any free choice of any job in the world?
Oh, any job in the world?
Any job.
I want to be a food taster.
Yeah?
Yeah, what are they called? Food connoisseur? I don't know. I just want to travel the world and taste food.
It can always happen. You never know where football takes you. A balance of career between tasting food, loving life, and then football coaching sounds a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally do it.
In terms of that, then, if you could take any coaching football job out there, manager, professional, national team, club level, what job would it be?
Oh my. That's a great question. Can it be on the men's side too?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I would love to coach. I would love to coach at Liverpool. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to dabble into the men's realm too one day. That'd be great.
Hopefully, and you never know where it could go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And last one, you might have already answered this, but what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
The relationships with people.
And that seems to be the most common answer, honestly, and it just shows where coaches are at and what they do and why they're, people-centered in terms of where coaching the world is and what it's all about. But I've great answers. I really loved that, and I've loved the time that I spent with you, and it's been great to have you on, and I'm so glad we've connected and I've come across your profile, and I wish you the best of luck in terms of everything that's up and coming, and hopefully over the course of the season it goes well, and at the end of it we can reconnect again and do another episode and then talk about the reflections on that compared to this, to where that'll be at that point. So best of luck, but I am truly grateful that you've come on.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so easy to talk to. It makes it 1,000 times, makes me feel 1,000 times more comfortable, and I appreciate being on here. So thanks for reaching out, and let's make sure we're staying connected, because I would love to bounce things off of you. I'm really excited about this relationship.
Absolutely. But anytime you want to drop a call, etc., just let me know. And that's what coaching's all about, and that's what I want to be all about. So it's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, let's definitely stay connected, because I'm hoping to be out in the US in a couple of years' time myself. My best mate lives in California, so he keeps tempting me to come and live with him for a bit. So it's definitely on the cards after my degree finishes. So then when I'm out there, hopefully we can connect out in person over that period of time. So.
Where in California does your friend live?
Palm Beach.
Oh my goodness, yes. I'm originally from California, born and raised, and so I was raised outside of San Francisco, and that's where I ended up going to school and stuff. But yeah, no, if you're ever in California, let me know.
Oh, amazing! No, I definitely will. But yeah, I look forward to staying in touch, and good luck. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Yep, you too. Bye.